3D bioprinting uses the concept of additive manufacturing of layers to arrive at a three-dimensional object. Currently, scientists are only printing organ tissue and simple organs for pharmaceutical testing. However, bioprinting's emerging application is printing fully functional organs for transplants, which will be the focus of this video. Prior to the construction of the organ, either stem cells or target organ cells are extracted from the patient and cultivated for use alongside bioink. Bioink is a material that mimics the matrix environment that promotes cell growth. It's deposited along with scaffolding material and the extracted cells as filament layers to create 3D tissue structures. Following an incubation period to allow for organ development and testing, transplantation would occur. The main stakeholders we'll be discussing are patients who require organ transplants, those who do not require the organs but are still in the market for them, geneticists and companies who engineer and grow the organs, and the surgeons performing the procedure.
The emergence of 3D bioprinting comes with various impacts on society. From the perspective of patients, their lives would be enhanced and prolonged, as death and suffering due to organ diseases would be mitigated. Organ printing would also diminish the need for human organ donors. This could result in an end to the illegal trade of organs and the human abuses that occur with it. Society would also benefit from former patients who can now continue being productive members of society, as well as the cost savings from patients no longer on organ donor lists, who would otherwise require continual care. Lastly, in addition to healthy tissue, diseased tissue can be created using a patient's cells. Incorporating these cells in unhealthy tissue products would result in more personalized and effective treatment models. Next, we'll examine the societal risks and discuss the ethical concerns. Let's tackle the issue of enhancing humans. Consider a thought experiment. A child is suffering from a heart defect. An older individual who has a healthy heart wants to mitigate the risk of coronary disease as he ages. Who should get the heart, given the finite resources? Consequentialists would prioritize the child, as saving a life has more certain utility than satisfying the whims of an individual.
But wait, this undermines the autonomy of individuals wanting enhancement, as well as the autonomy of companies in selling to whosoever they please. Moreover, should we not encourage enhancements? Societies historically preferred individuals who are more capable and less susceptible to disease. They would be more productive, contribute more to society, and be less of a burden in regards to healthcare costs.
Well, preference is the root of discrimination. In fact, insurance companies, employers, and society could discriminate against those who are unenhanced given their relative feebleness. Permitting enhancements would mean an even smaller supply of organs for those who require them for medical reasons, making them more expensive and difficult to obtain. Next is the ethical concern of wealth divide. Going back to the thought experiment, let's say that the older individual is wealthy and instead of wanting to be enhanced, he wants to secure much of the organ supply preemptively. Should this be permitted?
Well, what makes printed organs any different from other medical commodities and pharmaceuticals? Those who can afford to pay more should receive better healthcare. Any intervention is a breach of autonomy.
This is a straw man argument. Who is to say that the current practice of free market distribution of such precious resources is ethical? Consequentialists would argue that in order to maximize public welfare, the supply of organs should be restricted to only those who require them, as determined by doctors.
Accountability is another large ethical issue. If an organ is designed to mimic a natural human organ, if and when it fails, who, if anyone, is to blame? Should there be guarantees on printed organs when there are no real guarantees on natural organs?
Well, given that we are trying to preserve life, there should be some minimum standards, of course, under normal conditions. However, if the organ is abused, as with natural organs, the fault lies with the user.
How do you define normal conditions and abuse? Don't guarantees, fail-safes, and fail-softs lean towards an enhanced organ, which circles back to a previous ethical concern? What are the minimum requirements? Would it be ethical to keep a patient on the organ donor list because the printed organs were slightly less reliable than donated organs, or should the risk be accepted? Who should make this decision? Deontology would say the patient, while utilitarians would say those most capable of making the right choice, aka the doctors.
So, what exactly should be done? Realistically, market forces and the private sector's influence would mean that there would be a public and private sector for these organs. The private market would largely be for the wealthy and whimsical, while the public would be need-based, as determined by doctors.
While not optimal in the eyes of utilitarians, this option satisfies Kantians, and in the long run, the private sector revenue would likely be pumped back into the R&D of printed organs. Faster and better techniques could be learned, which would help future patients, a silver lining for utilitarians. As for enhancements, various upcoming technologies face the same question. Hence, extensive social modeling should be performed to determine the exact risks of permitting enhancements and determining where to draw the line to mitigate discrimination and other negative outcomes.
Lastly, accountability will be largely based on the decision pertaining to enhancements. However, the printed organs must meet industry agreed upon standards. Extensive testing should be undertaken to determine the risk posed by these organs. This risk should at the very least match the risk of complications and death of individuals on donor lists. At this point, the new source of organs would be considered beneficial. And as with all medical decisions, the patient should be fully informed of the situation and should be allowed to autonomously decide. If they do decide to ask for a doctor's opinion, they are still exercising their autonomy by getting an expert opinion, all in the hopes of reaching the best outcome. Hence, utilitarians and Kantians are both appeased.